Chapter 1. What, Where, How, and When. What can we know about the past? There are several things we can find out. What people ate, the kinds of clothes they wore, the houses in which they lived. We can find out about the lives of hunters, herders, farmers, rulers, merchants, priests, crafts, persons, artists, musicians, and scientists. We can also find out about the games children played, the stories they heard, the plays they saw, and the songs they sang. Where did people live? Find the river Narmada on map 1 page 2. Let's see the river first. Here is the Narmada river between the Vindhyas and Satpura ranges. People have lived along the banks of this river for several 100,000 years. Some of the earliest people who lived here were skilled gatherers, that is, people who gathered their food. They knew about the vast wealth of plants in their surrounding forests and collected roots, fruits, and other forest produce for their food. They also hunted animals. Now find the Suleiman and Kirthar hills to the northwest. Here is the Suleiman and Kirthar hills. Some of the areas where women and men first began to grow crops such as wheat and barley about 8,000 years ago are located here. People also began rearing animals like sheep, goat, and cattle and lived in villages. Locate the Garo hills to the northeast and the Vindhyas in central India. Here we can see the Garo hills. And also we have seen the Vindhyas just above the Narmada rivers and Satpura just below the Narmada river. So these Garo hills and the Vindhyas in central India, these were some of the other areas where agriculture developed. Garo hills and Vindhyas are some of the areas where agriculture developed. The places where rice was first grown are to the north of the Vindhyas. Important point, the places where rice was first grown are to the north of the Vindhyas. Trace the river Indus and its tributaries. Tributaries are the smaller rivers that flow into a large river. Locating Indus. So this is the Indus river and these are its tributaries. This is the Indus and this Jhelum, Chenab, Ravi, Byas and Satluj. About 4,700 years ago, some of the earliest cities flourished on the banks of these rivers. Later, about 2,500 years ago, cities developed on the banks of Ganga and its tributaries and along the sea coast. Locate the Ganga and its tributary called the Son. Here we can see the Ganga river and its river, Son river, coming from the south and connecting to the Ganga river. In ancient times, the area along these rivers to the south of the Ganga was known as Magad. Its rulers were very powerful and set up a large kingdom. Kingdoms were set up in other parts of the country as well. Throughout, people traveled from one part of the subcontinent to another. The hills and the high mountains, including the Himalayas, deserts, and rivers and seas, made journeys dangerous at times, but never impossible. So men and women moved in search of livelihood as also to escape from natural disaster like floods or droughts. So this is one reason why people were constantly on the move. They were in search of livelihoods and also to escape from natural disaster like floods and droughts. Floods or droughts. Sometimes men marched in armies conquering others' lands. Besides, merchants traveled with caravans or ships carrying valuable goods from place to place. And religious teachers walked from village to village, town to town, stopping to offer instruction and advice on the way. Finally, some people perhaps traveled driven by a spirit of adventure, wanting to discover new and exciting places. All these peop- all these people led to the sharing of ideas between people. Hills, mountains, and seas form the natural frontiers of the subcontinent. While it was difficult to cross these frontiers, those who wanted could and did scale the mountains and cross the seas. People from across the frontiers also came into the subcontinent and settled here. These movements of people enriched our cultural traditions. People have shared new ways of carving stone, composing music, and even cooking food over several hundreds of years. Names of the land. Two of the words we often use for our country are India and Bharat. The word India comes from the Indus, called Sindhu in Sanskrit. The word India comes from the Indus, called Sindhu in Sanskrit. The Iranians and the Greeks, who came through the northwest about 2500 years ago and were familiar with the Indus, called it the Hindus or the Indos, and the land to the east of the river was called India. The name Bharat was used for a group of people who lived in the northwest and who are mentioned in the Rig Veda. The earliest composition in Sanskrit dated to about 3500 years ago. Later, it was used for the country. Finding about the past. There are several ways of finding out about the past. One is to search for and read books that were written long ago. These are called manuscripts because they were written by hand. This comes from the Latin word manu, meaning hand. Manuscripts means written by hand. These were usually written on palm leaf or on the specially prepared bark of a tree known as the birch, which grows in the Himalayas. Over the years, many manuscripts were eaten away by insects, some were destroyed, but many have survived, often preserved in temples and monasteries. These books dealt with all kinds of subjects, religious beliefs and practices, the lives of kings, medicine, and science. Besides, there were epics, poems, plays. Many of these were written in Sanskrit. Others were in Prakrit, language used by ordinary people, and Tamil. We can also study inscriptions. These are writings on relatively hard surfaces such as stones or metal. Sometimes kings got their orders inscribed so that people could see, read, and obey them. There are other kinds of inscriptions as well, where men and women, including kings and queens, recorded what they did. For example, king often kept records of victories in the battle. As you can see, this is an old inscription. This inscription dates to about 2250 years ago and was found in Kandahar, present-day Afghanistan. It was written on the orders of a ruler named Ashoka. You will read about him in chapter 8. When we write anything, we use a script. Scripts consist of letters or signs. When we read what is written or speak, we use a language. This inscription was written in two different scripts and languages. On top you can see Greek and below you can see Aramaic, which were used in this area. There were many other things that were made and used in the past. Those who study these objects are called archaeologists. Those who study the things that were made and used in the past are called archaeologists. They study the remains of the buildings made of stone and brick, paintings and sculpture. They also explore and excavate. Excavation means digging under the surface of the earth. They also explore and excavate to find tools, weapons, pots, pens, ornaments, and coins. Some of these objects may be of stone, others of bone, brick, clay, or metal. Objects that are made of hard, imperishable substances usually survive for a long time. Archaeologists also look for bones of animals, birds, and fish to find out what people ate in the past. Plant remains survive far more rarely. If seeds of grain or pieces of wood have been burnt, they survived in a charred form. Historians, that is, scholars who study the past, often use the word source to refer to the information found from manuscripts, inscriptions, and archaeology. Once sources are found, learning about the past becomes an adventure as we reconstruct it bit by bit. So, historians and archaeologists are like detectives who use all these sources like clues to find out about our past. One past or many. Did you notice the title of this book, Our Pasts? We have used the word pasts in plural to draw attention to the fact that the past was different for different group of people. For example, the lives of herders or farmers were different from those of kings and queens. The lives of merchants were different from those of craftspersons, and so on. Also, as is true even today, people follow different practices and customs in different parts of the country. For example, today most people living in Andaman Islands get their own food by fishing, hunting, and collecting forest produce. By contrast, most people living in cities depends on others for supplies of food. Differences such as these existed in the past as well. Besides, there is another kind of difference. We know a great deal about kings and the battles they fought because they kept records of their victories. Generally, ordinary people such as hunters, fishing folk, gatherers, farmers, or herders did not keep records of what they did. While archaeology helps us to find out about their lives, there is much that remains unknown. What do dates mean? If somebody asks you the date, you will probably mention the day, month, and the year. 2000 and something. These years are counted from the date generally assigned to the birth of Jesus Christ, the founder of Christianity. So 2000 means 2000 years of the birth after the birth of Christ. All dates before the birth of Christ are counted backwards and usually have the letters BC before Christ. In this book, we will refer to dates going back from the present using 2000 as our starting point. Letters with dates. BC, we have seen, stands for before Christ. You will sometimes find AD before dates. This stands for two Latin words, Anno Domino, meaning in the year of the Lord, that is Christ. So 2005 can also be written as AD 2005. Sometimes CE is used instead of AD and BCE instead of BC. The letter CE stands for Common Era and BCE stands for before Common Era. We use these terms because the Christian era is now used in most countries of the world. In India, we began using this form of dating from about 200 years ago, and sometimes the letter BP means before present, are used. Elsewhere, we have seen that inscriptions are written on hard surfaces. Many of these were written several hundreds of years ago. All inscriptions contain both scripts and languages. Languages which were used as well as scripts have changed over time. So, how do scholars understand what was written? This can be done through a process known as decipherment. One of the most famous stories of decipherment comes from Egypt, a country in North Africa where there were kings and queens about 5000 years ago. Rosetta is a town on the north coast of Egypt, and here an inscribed stone was found which contained inscriptions in three different languages and scripts: Greek and two forms of Egyptian. Scholars who could read Greek figured out that the names of kings and queens were enclosed in a little frame called cartouche. They then placed the Greek and the Egyptian signs side by side and identified the sounds for which the Egyptian letters stood. As you can see, a lion stood for L and a bird for A. One, once they knew what the letters stood for, they could read other inscriptions as well. As you can see, the bird stood for A and the lion for L. So that was all from the chapter 1 of our pass. Thank you.